All right. All right, it looks like we're ready to roll. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chicago, and thank you for attending today's presentation. My name is Cesar Unguernascio. I'm a program manager with Skype for Business division in Microsoft. I've been with the company for about 20 years now. I started doing work that helped build operating systems, Windows 2000, DNS. I did some work in identity management. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been doing work across different versions of the product, currently known as Skype for Business. I started in OCS. I made the transition to Link 2010. And recently, I'm proud to say that I was part of shipping Skype for Business in different flavors. With me, I have two of my colleagues that will help, that have helped with the presentation. They're going to help us with one demo. So I'm going to ask you, let's pray to the demo gods in advance, and hopefully stuff is going to work fine. Ramesh and Vivek, I'm pretty sure they're going to be very helpful today, also in taking some of the questions that you'll have during the talk. Our talk today is intended to cover the subject hybrid configurations. A little bit of deep dive on what does hybrid means for the new Skype for Business scenarios. I need to find it. Before we go through that, I'm going to have a quick show of hands about this word called hybrid. I've been attending many sessions throughout the week. We're today in the 4th week of the conference, and I'm pretty sure you attended a lot of sessions as well. How many of you have heard the term hybrid in your previous conference? Not necessarily Link or Skype, hybrid in general. It's a very popular term. It gets so popular that I think it did strike me that we have it on the buses as well. So I was walking in Chicago, beautiful city, and I was focusing on presentation, and I saw hybrid on bus. And it did strike me, because we have a tendency to talk a lot about technology and how it works. But at the end of the day, what matters is an end-to-end scenario. Let's take the bus, for example. The scenario is very simple. Take me from point A to point B. The technology that is being used to do that, it's under the hood. I have some expectation it's going to be done fast, secure, and reliable. But what matters is the focus on the scenario, and let's make sure that we have a good story as we're building hybrid solutions. The scenario continues to hold together. Let's list a little bit of what you want to get out of today's presentation. The objectives for today are to help you understand the Skype for Business hybrid scenarios and features. We will cover a little bit about the features. We will not go in the full details. There have been a lot of other very good presentations throughout the week that I'm going to point to make sure you have a chance to read from the materials that you're going to get from the conference. What are the planning and deployment considerations of Skype for Business Hybrid with various on-premise variations of Link or Skype for Business? What are the type of interactions that are happening in a hybrid environment between an on-premise deployment that has Link or Skype for Business and what is available in online? The key takeaways of today's presentation, I want you to really walk away with better understanding of Skype for Business hybrid and features supported in different hybrid topologies. Have a good understanding of the topology requirements and the deployment requirements, what it takes to light up hybrid, and hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate that through a couple of one demo. Things that we will not cover in today's presentation, in case you were interested in that. Live meeting migrations, migrating from the existing conferencing, legacy conferencing solution in Microsoft Live Meeting, migration of those scenarios. We will not cover Office 365, the dedicated offering, in today's talk, and we will not cover Link Hosting Pack. If you have questions about those particular topics, I'll be more than happy to take those questions at the end of the session or in the booth, in the Skype for Business booth. Let's start by clarifying a couple of terms and acronyms. We're going to use them a lot during the presentation, and it's good to introduce them and make sure we're on the same page on what we're talking about. Skype for Business Server 2015. It's the latest server version of the product, expected to be deployed on-premise. We released, we have general availability of Skype for Business 2015 as of 5/1. Woohoo, 5/1, May 1st. Good. Skype for Business Online. It's the set of scenarios enabled by Skype for Business, but delivered through the Office 365 multi-tenant offering in the Microsoft Cloud. Office 365 is the term we use to refer to the public cloud offering from Microsoft. Skype for Business is one of the workloads that is available in Office 365, alongside with the other very popular options like SharePoint, Exchange, and a lot of other things that Office 365 provides. Skype for Business Hybrid. We will refer to Skype for Business Hybrid as a combination between on-premise components and online components that are getting involved in delivering an end-to-end scenario for a user. We got to the point where there are significant scenarios that, to light it up for an end user, we have options of interaction between on-premise pieces and online pieces. Skype for Business for Split Domain. It's a technology available in the product that enable what we call shared SIP address space, essentially enabling a deployment for a company to span between on-premise and online, while keeping the identity, the SIP identity of the user in that configuration. For example, me, Cesaru at Microsoft.com, if I start on-premise, I'm able to operate, if moved to the cloud, as the same identity, Cesaru at Microsoft.com, as a result of the technology that we're referring to as split domain. Now, what are the deployment choices? Historically, there are two spectrums of the deployment. You do have the on-premise version of the product that gives you the highest control, gives you the deepest integration with what you have deployed in the rest of your on-premise environment. It comes with a price. You have to maintain those servers. You have to deploy solutions about high availability. You have to plan cycles for doing upgrades and keeping the servers up and running. The other spectrum of the available deployments is what we're referring to online. It's a cloud service. It's the lowest maintenance from your point of view. It's managed, the infrastructure behind it is managed by Microsoft. It's a scalable service. We take care of deploying, refreshes, making sure the servers stay up and running, monitoring, and doing all the server management. There are some differences. Historically, there have been some differences between the offering. Now, the team has been really, really busy in the last year or so to work hard on delivering features that enable us to close the gap, reduce the gap between on-premise and online environments. We're able to integrate fast in online. We do have a pretty fast cadence of every month. We deploy new bits, and that gives us a great opportunity to validate features, get feedback, understand the interactions of the end users with the online system, and quickly refine that. So the set of functionality available in cloud grows at a faster rate. We're also part of the Microsoft company. It's a strategic move that has been communicated across the whole company about being able to deliver cloud first and mobile first. We're snapping to that strategy, and that reflects in how we allocate resources and how we go about enhancing the product. So the first item is the most important one. The set of features between on-premise and online is really shrinking. So a third option that is becoming even more interesting is what we call the hybrid. You can pick the best of the both worlds. Some workloads can stay on-premise because you have specific requirements, or maybe the feature is not ready for online, while you can leverage the cloud to the hybrid topology and hybrid configurations, that you can start moving users and workloads to the cloud without having to invest on-premise in maintaining that infrastructure. We built a hybrid solution that is really in your hands. You have your own pace on how fast do you want to move, the timeline, the regions, and it's not a rip and replace. You also have the flexibility of migrating Skype for Business alongside with the other workloads that are of interest for you in the cloud, like Exchange and SharePoint. All right. So here's an interesting, very heavy slide. It gives you a perspective of how the cloud has evolved and where are we in terms of feature comparison between on-premise capabilities, online capabilities, and what's coming on the roadmap. For those of you that have attended similar conferences in the past, you probably saw a similar slide. And if you remember those slides, it was a lot of red of incomplete in the online side. Now, there's a lot more green now in online, and more horizontals that turn green across the board. One thing of note that I wanted you to be aware of, in the past we used to separate deployments as a user is on-premise, they're going to get all the workloads, IAM, presence, conferences from an on-premise deployment. You have an online user that gets all the experiences from an online environment. Now, we have two additional layers. We have an online user plus hybrid features. An online user will be able to use features from on-premise. And then we have the other dimension that calls for on-premise user to be able to use hybrid features. So the user continues to stay on-premise, but some scenarios will be delivered to the cloud. There are a couple of asterisks in this slide, and it's really important to call out. Some of the features, we have announced them as being on the roadmap. They're going to show up when we think they're ready, but we're committed to delivering those. Some examples are in enterprise voice, online user plus hybrid features. It's this feature that enables an online user to make and receive PSTN calls via on-premise infrastructure. That's an example of an online user that is going to use an on-premise infrastructure to deliver, to get the voice scenarios. The key point I wanted to make in this slide is, if you look at what's available today, plus what we have announced on the roadmap, there's a wider spectrum of scenarios that are enabled in online, and also the hybrid nature of the scenarios that are coming your way increases. Let me give you another example. For broadcast meetings. Broadcast meeting is a new feature that will enable large meetings with 10,000 or so participants that will run only in online. So if the first iteration of that feature is going to show up in online first. That's an indication of how we leveraging the cloud to iterate fast and bring value to you early. All right. So with all these capabilities, in terms of features available online, features available on-premise, and the capabilities of doing hybrid, you really have a path, easy path between, if you start from on-premise, migrating to the cloud in different phases. What we've seen customers doing, they start small. They pilot Skype for Business, or in the previous, it used to be Link scenarios. They have a set of users that they start migrating to the cloud, typically a non-critical modality. and also a feature that has a better parity between on-premise and online. IAM presence are the typical ones that a customer would start with. You will continue to have enterprise voice going through your on-premise infrastructure, that being Skype for Business server or a PBX. Over time, you can increase the scope of the scenario that you're getting from online, from a hybrid configuration. You can add audio-video conferencing. There's going to be new capabilities lighting up in the cloud about cloud PSTN. We're going to start in certain countries. I think this year, by the fall of this year, we're going to have it available in US. So you'll be in a situation where you can start moving users to cloud and start leverage the cloud PSTN, while other users continue to stay on premise. Large meetings is another scenario that becomes really, really appealing in that configuration. There's a question about what about unified messaging? The current plan is to continue to use Exchange for unified messaging. For users that run in the cloud, for unified messaging to work, the Exchange mailbox has to be in the cloud as well. All right? That's a good question, because if you look at the slide, you're going to see hybrid for both Skype for Business and Exchange. You can move Link in parallel with Exchange. The only key requirement that we're having there is to make sure that before a Link account gets moved to cloud, the Exchange mailbox is in the cloud. The other set of scenarios in that combination are when Skype for Business is in the cloud and Exchange is on-premise is very limited. We have a couple of customers that went that route, but what we're supporting is fairly limited, and all the investments that we're doing for adding features in the product are optimized for that particular combinations. Exchange and SharePoint for given users are both in the cloud. Okay, so what are what's the question? Can you repeat the question? Yeah, the question is, of the combinations for what combinations will work and what will not? So when both the mailbox and Skype for Business are on-prem, that's supported. When both workloads for a user are in the cloud, that's going to work. If Skype for Business is on-premise and Exchange is online, is expected to work. It's the other combination that has problems when Skype for Business for a user is in the cloud and Exchange, the mailbox is on-premise. That is not the configuration that we're supporting now. Okay. So at a high level, what are the benefits of hybrid? First of all, it enables you to do gradual transitions of users from on-premise to online. The solution that we have built in support of hybrid is optimized to ensure interoperability between users that are still on-premise and users that have been moved to online across the core scenarios that Skype for Business provides. With that, you can really go about choosing specific sites or specific workloads to move to the cloud that are appropriate to the type of activities that those users want or the locations where you want to enable those new services. It's really built to allow a piloting phase and then work run into growing the environment, the online environment to high scale. I mentioned already, but I'm going to call that out again. The migration is decoupled between workloads. I call out especially the Link and Exchange, Skype for Business and Exchange integrated scenarios. I will make an amendment to that by saying it's really important when you plan your Skype for Business transitions to the cloud and the hybrid work that you're doing, Exchange has to be part of the mix. There are a significant number of scenarios that don't work when Skype for Business is in the cloud, Exchange is on-premise, and the whole solution is optimized to around the idea that the mailbox moves first. With hybrid, you will continue to leverage your on-premise investments where appropriate. I gave the example of sometime in the future being able to make PSTN calls from an online user that will go through the on-premise infrastructure. I think that's going to be an important scenario, especially for cases where we might not have initial presence in geographies. The business voice in the cloud will not be available across all geographies. It's going to be a staged approach. So you might be in a situation where your company that wants to come to cloud, we don't have an offering yet for business voice in that area. So there you can still move a user to the cloud and continue to use your on-premise PSTN infrastructure until we have the service available in the cloud over there. And also, a very important benefit, I already mentioned it, but I'm going to call it out again, is this notion about having access to new features very early. We're doing a lot of fast coding. It's easy to deploy. We don't have the complexities of on-premise environments. We control the cloud, and it's fairly easy for us to light up a new feature, put it in your hands, and validate how it works, improve, and fix at a very fast rate. I already gave you the example of large meetings. It's going to come in the cloud first. There's another feature that we enable first time in online. Searching from a Skype for Business client, being able to search a Skype contact. The first time that feature showed up was in online. The reason for that, it requires a new version of the Edge server. It's kind of difficult to deploy it on-premise alongside with your existing deployment. It was very easy to get that going in online. That's another example of features that light up pretty fast in online first and get exposed to you. Now, a little bit about the history of hybrid. Our hybrid solutions have been around for a while now. Link 2010 was the first version where we have enabled hybrid. The primary scenario there was to unblock Exchange migrations to cloud. That's when the hybrid scenario came to life. Being able to move a mailbox to cloud and make sure that the on-premise link scenarios with the integration with continue to work. After Link 2010, we have made significant improvements with Link 2013. We have added the split domain capabilities, and we have made it easier to move users between on-premise and online or back. Here's a graph of how the number of tenants that are enabled for hybrid has increased in the last year or so. We have an order of thousands of tenants that have taken that road. There are different ways in which these tenants or these customers are using the hybrid. We've seen a lot of them, they start small, they pilot, they try different scenarios, and eventually they come all in. To give you a story, it was about 6 months ago when such an event happened. We have a pretty sophisticated monitoring system that looks over the capacity, the load on the servers, and make sure that they're well balanced and they're healthy. On a Monday morning, about 6 months ago, we came to work, and there was a huge increase in number of active endpoints on a particular pool. We obviously raised some alerts, and we started investigating. It turns out it was a tenant that moved about 9,000 or 10,000 users over a weekend. And all those users were signing in against online Monday morning. How many of you have done that? Is it a customer in the room? But it was quite pleasantly surprising. So that tells us there are customers out there that find what's available today in the online offering good enough for them. So they're going to move everyone to online, and they're going to get the train pretty fast in getting access to the new features. Here's another interesting fact there. We have deployed hybrid in Microsoft as well. we as a company, we have a strong belief that we have to use the products that we're building before a customer sees them to flesh out issues, understand the IT admin experiences, understand the end user experiences. We have about 25,000 people in Microsoft, in our own company, getting Skype for Business services from one slice of online, and they're pretty intense users in terms of conferencing, IM, application sharing, and voice and video. So the key point is the hybrid deployments are happening, and the data that comes at our end tells us it's increasing, and some of the deployments finish pretty fast into flipping over all the users in becoming online. All right, how do you make that happen? What are the core requirements on hybrid? You need an Office 365 tenant that has a license for Skype for Business online. If you already have a tenant that has for SharePoint and Exchange, you don't need to create a new tenant. Just make sure you have the right Skype for Business licenses. You need to deploy a directory synchronization solution that will bring the directory from your on-premise to online. For user authentication, there is some configuration that has to be in place. We support today active AAD sync with password sync, and also we're supporting a single sign-on through ADFS. The first three requirements are very common with the other workloads in Office 365, like SharePoint and Exchange. If you already went through the process of deploying that identity piece, you should be good to go on those areas for Skype for Business as well. Yes, there's a question.
You have to have both.
The question is, do we have to have both?
You have to have AAD sync and ADFS, or can you do it with just AAD sync?
The answer is you don't have to have both. ADFS will give you the single sign-on. The AAD with password sync doesn't give you a single sign-on, but allows your password that you set on-premise to propagate to the cloud.
I can do it without ADFS.
Yes. Right. Another thing, it's your on-premise topology. So we have today a requirement that Skype for Business is deployed in a user forest. We do not support scenarios where Skype for Business is in a resource forest. Firewalls. You need to allow the front ends to connect to Office 365 ports for managed tasks. And another thing that is important to keep in mind, and we hit it ourselves, the moment you start moving users to online, those users will start getting services from the Office 365 cloud. It's a different set of ports that you have to open, different set of URLs that you have to allow from your company to go through. Yes, there's a question?
What is the statement about currently not supported for hybrid? Does that mean that it could be changed in the future? Are you thinking about it?
Yep. The question is, we don't support today a resource forest as a starting point for Skype for Business to bring data to the cloud. We're having internal conversations to understand the importance of that scenario, and I think we'll make a decision based on that. We heard it from a couple of customers. That's why we also put it on the slide. We don't have an execution plan yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Express route. You've heard about this requirement that's coming to really help deployments that are heavy on voice. It is highly recommended that you deploy a solution based on express route that will bring the traffic from your environment into the Office 365 cloud, especially for audio and video scenarios, and especially when you have business voice in the cloud. That's going to be pretty heavy on audio, and also heavy audio-video conferencing. We strongly recommend you investigate deploying an express route solution. All right, in terms of planning considerations, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Obviously, the on-premise infrastructure, the server versions that you have deployed on-premise. The Active Directory forest, the type of topology you have there. I mentioned resource forest being one of the things that is not there today. The type of authentication mechanism that you want to deploy. We have ADFS password sync as the two options. And for the synchronization between on-premise and online, we're supporting DIRSync and AAD sync. Edge deployment and federation, there are requirements on your edge. You have to have a Link server or Skype for Business server edge deployed on-premise and also enabled for federation. Another important thing that you have to keep in mind when you do your planning for moving is what type of features do you want to leverage in the cloud. Because there are still some differences between on-premise and online. There are certain legal requirements in certain parts of the world that we might not be able to meet yet in online. And the Skype for Business availability in your region. I gave the example of business voice in the cloud. And the identities and the user profiles and segments that are appropriate for the moves. There's a pretty in-depth talk that happened earlier in the week. I gave there a pointer to that talk. It's really good material to go through and understand the key points that contribute to making a decision when to move and what to move. Mark and Thomas have done a great job in describing that. What are the on-premise topologies? We do support, starting point, Link 2010 plus Link 2013 on-premise. The requirement is to have an edge and federation deployed. We've seen this being adopted and successful for environments that have IAM presence as the core scenario. And it also works in conferencing. You know, after you move users between on-premise and the cloud, there's good interoperability between users on the premise and users online in conferencing. There's a requirement in that topology, and that's where Link 2013 comes in. To do the moves require a Link 2013 as a minimum version for the PowerShell. Link 2013 came with a set of cross-premise moving capabilities that allow users to keep their contacts and keep user-generated data. Another topology that is supported, your Link 2013, your server and edge, it's easier to use. You already have the Link 2013 PowerShell commander that allows you to do moves between on-premise and online. Works great for IAM presence interoperability and conferencing. Skype for Business Server 2015, it's the latest version that we released recently. We'll continue to support that topology. So you have on-premise Skype for Business Server 2015. You have an edge, probably upgraded to Skype for Business 2015. It comes with a couple of improvements around, there's an admin UI for configuring hybrid. There's an admin UI for user moves. Yes?
Thank you. To be able to use a cloud voice with on-prem PSTN, the user could be homed online, and the call will be routed to the on-premise infrastructure?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
My question is, if I want to use the on-premise infrastructure to call to the PSTN network,
yep,
can I take advantage of that if the user is homed in the online?
So the question, if a user is homed online, can they make calls using the on-premise infrastructure?
Yeah.
The short answer is that is not available today. It's not GA'd. It's something that we have communicated that we will work, and we have it on the roadmap. We're going to be working on building that feature in the future. It's not available today.
Okay.
That's the short answer. It's on the roadmap to enable for a future release. The question is there any ETA? We're not ready to communicate an ETA. I only know that the team in Redmond is working really hard on the architectural aspects out of it. We'll communicate an ETA when those things get figured out. You know, it goes beyond the routing aspects. We are really, really, we think it's really important to also build a good IT pro story around that scenario. How do you configure? How do you manage that configuration? How do you troubleshoot when something goes wrong? When at that point you're split between 2 networks and maybe 3 networks. So we're working really, really hard to also build an IT admin story for that scenario before we light it up. All right. There are 2 things, and I'm going to skip through this because we're quickly running out of time. There are 2 components that contribute to configuring hybrid. You have the identity piece. It's common with the rest of the work, with the other workloads in Office, Exchange, and SharePoint. And then you have the Skype for Business specific configurations. Let me go through this table because it's more descriptive of what happens. So on the identity sequence, obviously you have to create, I already mentioned, an Office 365 tenant and validate the domains that will be used for your deployment. It's an operation that is being done in Office 365. You have to configure the DIRSync options and or AD sync. That is something that will bring the directory from on-premise to online. Again, if it's something that you already have done for Exchange and SharePoint, you can leverage that process. Decide on the user authentication and do the configuration that will allow your end users to connect to online services via a single sign-on experience like ADFS or the password sync. On the Skype for Business specific configuration, there's a need to have a link or Skype for Business Edge deployed. The core reason for that is the cross-premise traffic goes over the federation route. So Edge has to be there, and also the federation has to be enabled on your on-premise Edge configuration. We have to enable a tenant for split domain. Enablement of a tenant for split domain is something that tells our Office 365 infrastructure that the tenant will be moving users, and we're using that indication in the routing decisions. There's a new UI in Skype for Business Admin Center that will simplify that operation a lot. The networking and the firewall configurations, we already mentioned the strong recommendation to deploy express route if your scenarios include heavy audio and video modalities. And also, when doing the moves, we require a version of PowerShell that is optimized to do to transfer between on-premise and online user data like contacts, ACLs, and groups. The min version there is Link PowerShell, Link 2013 PowerShell. Skype for Business PowerShell is good as well, and also on top of PowerShell, Skype for Business server has a newer UI that allows those cross-premise moves to be executed slightly faster. So the question is, can we migrate back on-prem? The answer is yes. The commander that gets called to move user can move users both directions.
Hi. Excuse me.
Yes.
Sorry, over here.
All right.
I just wanted to confirm the following topology. SFB in a resource forest and Exchange online, is that a supported topology? In a techno article, it says it is. I just need the confirmation.
The question is, Skype for Business in a resource forest and Exchange online. Ramesh, do you know the answer to that? Ramesh confirmed that it is supported. All right. All right. We're going to spend a little bit of time to talk through a couple of the core components that enable this routing between on-premise and online to work. There are 2 things that I'm going to zoom in because we're going to refer that later in the slides. One important construct is what we call a hosting provider. A hosting provider is a configuration on-premise that essentially tells the system about a different environment that can provide services for a given user. This is how you would create a hosting provider to connect your on-premise with Office 365 for split domain. The relevant fields are highlighted there. The proxy FQDN is the destination of any proxying of routing requests for users that are not homed on-premise. That's a well-known FQDN, cipher.online.link.com, that lands in Office 365. Enable shared SIP address space tells the system that between on-premise and that hosting environment, we're going to use the same SIP address space. It's split domain. And host OCS user set to true, which tells the system that remote environment will provide Skype for Business services for those users. On the user objects, we're going to talk a little bit about two very important attributes that are involved in routing. Let's start with an on-premise user. I call that chesayu@fabricam.com. Registrar pool tells the system where a user home is, or what is the pool that provides services for that user. It's typically on-premise. It's an on-premise pool in the deployment that you're managing. Hosting provider is an attribute for on-premise user is default to SRV. That gets involved in the traffic between online and on-premise when the online environment has to make a decision of routing a message or an invite to a user that is homed on-premise. SRV tells the system that in order to resolve the location of where the user is, we should use the DNS resolution mechanism for the domain that the user has. And that drives an important requirement for split domain. The domains that you have on-premise, they need to, the SRV records for those domains need to land on your on-premise edge. For the online user, what we view in on-premise, they don't have a registrar pool. They're not homed on-premise. But the key ingredient that will be used in making routing decisions is something called hosting provider. The hosting provider that gets stamped on the user will point to cipher.online.link.com, and that information will be used to find which hosting provider the details of the hosting provider and the hosting provider blob, and the system will consume this combination between what's said on the user and information about the hosting provider to understand how to route. We're going to go through some diagrams a little bit later. As an aside, a similar construct is being used for the integration. If you have users whose mailbox have been moved to cloud, while Skype for Business stays on-premise, there's a hosting provider that needs to be configured on-premise to tell the system how to route calls to UM. All right, let's put these pieces end-to-end. We talked about the initial directory synchronization between on-premise and Office 365. Initial provisioning, directory gets populated. The data gets into Skype for Business Online, where we capture it in the online directory. We talked about setting up ADFS, or password sync, for user authentication, bringing the external edge to your on-premise deployment if you don't have it already. We enabled the tenant in online for split domain. And at that point, using the on-premise PowerShell commandlets, Link Server 2013 PowerShell or Skype for Business 2015, users can be moved between environments. Again, it's a two-way. You can move it to online and back. The supported clients in hybrid configurations, meaning what client can be used for a user that is running in the cloud. We support Skype for Business client, the Link Client 2010. It's something that we added support about a year ago. The web apps, the Link mobile experiences are available for users homed in online, Link for Mac, and Link Room systems. If you look at the set of configurations that have to be done to enable hybrid, it's pretty complex. And we got a lot of feedback from customers trying to bootstrap hybrid, that it was very hard to do, and they've been doing a lot of mistakes with very little troubleshooting available. One of the major areas of improvements that you're going to see in Skype for Business Server 2015 is we have bubbled up those tasks into a nice UI that brings together all those separate configuration steps on the Skype for Business configuration in the UI, and it can be executed as one step. Right? So it's a new UI showing up in the admin, on-premise admin. Let's see how it will work to set up and validate or fix a hybrid setup. The admin would click the link for setup hybrid with Skype for Business Online. There's a nice piece of UI that describes what are the requirements and what the tool will do to validate. It does a check. And you click next. Right? It finds that those requirements are not met. It found that federation is not enabled on the edge. It was one of the requirements that we listed there. There was no federation to Office 365. There was no hosting provider created on premise in this example. And also is reaching out to Office 365. It's using a remote PowerShell to check the status of the tenant in online. Is the tenant enabled for federation? Is the tenant enabled for shared SIP address space? It finds those deficiencies. It's pretty obvious. It also can fix those for us. Click next, and under the covers, it does PowerShell calls on-premise, and it reaches out to online via remote PowerShell, and the configuration gets fixed. We've been working on a demo, and obviously our configuration got in a little bit of trouble last night, and we've been using this wizard pretty intensively. It's quite good. The question is the same wizard available for Exchange? The answer is this wizard works for Skype for Business. Sorry? This wizard is specific for Skype for Business. I'll reach out to the Exchange folks to see what's the story there. But this is Skype for Business. All right, I'm going to skip through this a little bit because we're going to have a demo, and we'll.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Hello? Hello? Thank you, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So Cesar mentioned about the control panel, right? So what I'm going to do a quick demo of the improvements that we made in the control panel, as well as try to move a user. Okay. Okay, so this is the new control panel that we have. As you can see, I have already signed in to this control panel using the online admin credentials. You can see that I already signed in this. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to set up hybrid. I was trying to do it before, and I know that some of the settings I didn't do it properly. So previously what we had to do is we had to look at the documentation and do it, and if you missed it, no, you won't know. You had to troubleshoot, right? So it was like a tedious process. Now, in fact, now we were running, as Cesar was mentioning, we were running into a few issues yesterday, and we used this, and we hit issues like this one. Right?
What did we find there? What's red over there?
Red is it says that federation is not enabled on your edge here. So previously, what we had to do is if you run into issues like this, you have to find the federation edge configuration commandlet, and you need to run it, right? So in this case, it shows that what is missing, and all you had to do is just rerun it. That's it, right? Basically, within few minutes, you can get the hybrid setup done, right? So if you remember, previously, Cesar was talking about two set of configuration. One is the common configuration, like creating tenant and doing the dirsing and ADFS, right? Those are common for all Office 365. After that, then there are a set of like 5 or 6 steps specific to Skype for Business. So all those Skype for Business steps are consolidated here and made it a wizard here. So other thing, quickly I can show something here. For example, like here, you can search for a user and it shows you where the user is home, right? Basically, it says that the user is home online or on-prem. For example, in this case, some of the users are online, some of the users are on-prem, right? I can add some filters. I can say that I want to filter by homed. So in this case, I can say I want to find all the users who are homed in online only. Then when I do the search, you can find them, right? So basically, there are ways that you can get the information easily from the UI right now. And also, for example, like let's say delete this, search again, it's going to bring me everything. So I can select a user, and there is an action where you can say that I want to move all users, or I can say that, or I can select for the selected user, I can move them to online or on-prem. So you can move between online and on-prem from the UI itself, right? But that said, like if you have more users in your company, you're not going to sit here and do it, right? So you're going to do it through command-led, right?
The command is still available. It's
yes,
just the UI. It's much easier to consume.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. If you have scripted everything, if you want to click run commandlets, everything's still available from the commandlet point of view as well. So it's just an easy way to do it. But if you already know, you can do through commandlet as well. So in this case, what you can see is that this Ramesh user, as Cesar was mentioning, like if you look at this user register pool is it's an on-prem pool, and the hosted provider identity is SRV, which means that the user is homed in on-prem, right? Let's see, and this user, let's see, he's already signed in here, and this user has some meetings as well.
So now we're trying to move a user?
Yes, he's trying to move a user. The user has some meetings as well, right? For example, like, hey, who is that? Vivek. Oh, hey, man. Yeah, let's do it. Few more minutes, I'll be running back there. Okay, so in this case, what I want to highlight is like now before I go here, when I create a new Skype meeting, you can see that the URL is pointing to on-prem, right? So when you move, after that, the URL will point to online. Just want to mention that. Let's go back here again, and let's see. In this case, I already signed in through I have the remote console, PowerShell, everything ready. So let's go back here. Okay. So in this case, what I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to move Ramesh user to target service fed.online.com, which means I'm moving them to online. It's asking you, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. So what happens is, under the background here, the move starts, and then user get logged off and log in, right? Let's look at on the server side. If I go back, assuming that the move has started, but it's not. And once it is done, eventually what happens is like it's completed already. Right now you can see it, the hosting provider is updated to safefed.online.com, so the user has already moved to online, and it takes a while for the client to come in. So let's see, it's still working on it. Meanwhile, let me try to create a new meeting and see what happens here. Yeah, still it's not completed. Typically what I've seen is like it takes like 1 minute to 2 minutes to get the move done. So once the move completed, then essentially you create a new meeting, you get the new URL for your new meetings. And also for your existing meetings, once the move completed, what happens is like the meeting itself will prompt you saying that, hey, this meeting got updated, so you need to go and resend the meeting. For that to happen, what you need to do is like you need to restart your Outlook, and maybe let's do a quick. Sorry, what was the question?
The question is, can we keep the URL for on-prem? That is not available today because it's different environments with different capabilities. So today that feature is not available.
Yes, yeah. For online, you're going to have same URL. In on-prem also, assuming that you have one URL for the specific subdomain, yes, you will have it. What we don't have is once you move from on-prem to online, you can't use the same meeting. Yeah, you need to update it. So in this case, let's go back here. Okay, this is still done. And meanwhile, if I do a search here, you can see that in the UI, it's updated as well. But client is still thinking. Let's look at here.
So what happened now, the move was successful, but the information about the user being homed in online has some time to replicate across the rest of the online environment. So this is live against Link Online production. Yes? Yeah, the question is, can you manage online users from the new on-premise UI? The answer is no. You still have to use different UIs. You have the tenant admin UI in Office 365 that can be used to manage policies for online users, and you will continue to use the on-premise admin UI for the on-premise. Yep. Yep. I'm not sure if you provide that read-only capability. I know the investment.
Statement first.
Yeah. So the question was, with the on-premise UI, can we view the properties like the policies that the users, the online users have assigned in online? And the answer is no. To view the policies, you still would have to use a solution like PowerShell. From on-premise, you connect via remote PowerShell to online to view the policies and properties of the users that are in online. Or you can use the Office 365 tenant admin UI. So the question is, for meeting URL,
Are they working on a redirect?
yeah.
Because that's a huge migration, right?
Yep. So the question, are we working on a redirect for meeting join to help users that got moved to have their meetings continue to work? We have some conversations on that. It's not exactly baked in a plan, in an execution plan. It's this kind of feedback that is going to help us go one way or the other. But there are some tools that are available that can be used. We have a meeting rescheduling tool that looks through all the meetings of a user that the user has, and is going to send updates, including the meeting URL to point to the new environment. And also in the Outlook, when you open the meeting, the Outlook add-in is going to prompt you, hey, there are some changes in the configuration. Do you want to reschedule the meeting? So no redirect so far. We're having conversations internally to understand.
Just want to add one more point there. So basically, as Cesar was saying, we have that tool that helps to elevate the current end user effort, right? But if you think about the meeting, there are two aspects to it. One is the URL, which is the easier part. We can redirect and figure out, right? The most important part is the dial-in information there, right? So that needs to be updated. That's one of the main sticking point for us. How do you make sure that the previous information that's inside the meeting still works when the user get moved from on-prem to online or vice versa? That's the biggest thing we are trying to figure out. In Exchange, it is a little bit easier. Yes, that's what I was trying to go there, right?
Yeah, so the point is online users will have a different dial-in number and on-premise. You talk. It's a good.
So I think we are done. So the user got signed back in, and so in this case, let's go back here. So the meeting, typically what happens?
The meeting coordinates. The billing. So the question is, how would you bill the usage for the PSTN conferencing? There are two options there. We essentially have an existing PSTN conferencing solution today that is based on ACP, audio conferencing providers. It's up and running, and we have some customers using it. The billing there is sent to the ACP provider. In the future, when we will add the native PSTN conferencing in the Skype for Business offering, we think you're going to have a bill from Microsoft. But that's work in progress. It's
cool. So to finish the demo there, like after the user got moved, he got signed back in, and then if they go to the Outlook, if they open the meeting that they scheduled before, they'll be prompted something like this, saying that, hey, the meeting information has changed. Do you want to update it? So they can open it, and basically what happens is, like, if you look at this, the meeting URL has been updated to the new meeting URL, the meeting URL appropriate for the online, and the user can send an update. So this is at the per meeting, right? User can open and do it, or we have the meeting update URL that helps you to do this update and send update automatically for all of your meeting that you already have. Yes.
So what if the organizer doesn't open the meeting before the meeting starts, or if I'm an attendee and I try to join that meeting?
If the meeting has not been rescheduled with what is available today, the meeting would fail.
Yes.
That's
or you can use that meeting update URL, meeting update tool to update it. So
would you have a meeting URL tool that scans through all the meetings of a user? We're still going to require the user to run that tool after the move, but it's going to do the updates for all the meetings.
So with that, we're done with the demo. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Yeah, you're back on.
All right. Let's look a little bit of what's happening behind the scenes while these moves are happening and live after the move.
It took some time.
Sign-in experience. In our example, we had Ramesh that got moved from on-premise to online. And let's walk the experience of re-signing in, hopefully with faster in the future, and what's happening in the system. So when we move Ramesh, the attributes that I mentioned about earlier, the home pool on-premise turned to null, and the hosting provider for Ramesh has changed to cfederalonline.com. These changes are happening because of the move commandlet. Ramesh tries to sign in. He's going to try to connect to the on-premise environment. The request is rerouted to online. The on-premise environment knows that Ramesh is hosted in a different environment. It has a hosting provider on the user, and the client gets redirected. There's the user authentication flow between our online, the Office 365 identity, and ADFS that will make the client get a valid token that can be consumed by online. And then Ramesh is able to sign in eventually. So it's a pretty complicated dance that happens post the move, but the key ingredient here is that information on the user object telling the system about the user being online. The question is the federation affected? The answer is no. The federation partners that you had before will continue to work after the move. Right? I'm in presence. Let's see what happens in a dialogue between Ramesh and Cesar on the beer conversation. So on-premise, Vivek, instead of Cesar, is inviting Ramesh to a conversation. Ramesh is an online user. Cesar reaches to his own home pool on-premise. The call is routed to online through the on-premise edge. The traffic between on-premise and online goes from front-end to edge, on-premise edge, and online edge. Again, the key here is the on-premise system knows what the hosting provider for the destination is. It's sipfed.online.link.com. The request lands on our online edge and gets proxied to the online pool where Ramesh is located, and the online pool will route that request to the endpoint where Ramesh has signed in. So the IAM and presence traffic between online and on-prem, again, is reliant on the hosting provider information and goes edge to edge. Yeah, the question is, once the user gets moved, is the CDR information reflecting both environments? Not yet. That's one of the areas that we know we'll have to solve as part of building an IT pro story that tracks a user and interactions end-to-end between on-premise and online. There is some indication in the CDR and QoE that the user is homed in a different environment, but we don't have yet a solution. We're working on that. That would bring an end-to-end view between on-premise and online. We know we have to. The question is, what about rating my call? It works, but it gets sent to where where the user pool is. All right. In terms of meetings, a couple of things. For users that got moved to online, they get a new URL. The format is slightly different. meet.link.com is the prefix. So Cesar, in order to join Ramesh's meetings, he's going to join an online based on that URL. He's going to go through the online media edge to reach the pool for audio video. The other way around, Cesar stays on-premise. He's going to continue to use the on-premise meeting URLs. And Ramesh is going to join the meeting as an external user. He's going to go through the edge to land to the pool. A little bit of early thinking in the PSTN using on-premise infrastructure. As I mentioned, it's something that we know we'll have to build in the future. The feature is not available yet. These are some early thoughts on how we would enable that scenario. It's really, really early thinking. There's a lot of work that still has to happen in our engineering teams to make it a reality. But we could use that as a starting point on how the flow would work end to end. So what we have here, we have Ramesh getting a call. The user's DID terminates the PSTN gateway or PBX on-premise. I need some signaling on the clicker. All right. So the call lands on-premise. The call is routed to on-premise SAP Skype for Business deployment, and the pool in the on-premise knows that Ramesh, the target, the destination for that call, is homed online. The request is proxied to online. That's the pool where Ramesh is getting his services. And the invite is routed to the user's login endpoints. For media, there are two paths there. If accepted, if Ramesh accepts the call, media is routed either locally through media bypass method that connects the client where Ramesh is to the PSTN gateway, or if he's an external user, he would connect through the edges. The reverse of that, when Ramesh would make a call, he's an online user. He wants to make a call going outbound, going to the PSTN infrastructure, on-premise PSTN infrastructure. Ramesh initiates the call. Client sends the invite to the online server, which is Ramesh's pool. There has to be a voice policy enforcement and call authorization to make sure the call goes through and is legit. And the call is routed to the PSTN egress points, and the media gets set up for the client. The same path, if the user is internal, we'll need to build something that will do bypass between the client and the PSTN gateway. If the user is external, he might land on that path to the edge. Again, this is very, very early thinking. There's a lot of stuff that we still need to figure out and build before we light up these scenarios end to end. I mentioned already the IT Pro scenarios. You know, how do you manage these environments? How do you troubleshoot end to end between on-premise and online environments? That's going to take us a fair amount of cycles to nearly through. But when we're ready to show it to you, it's going to be some early adopter programs that we'll be happy to have you part of it. This is really, really early thinking. This is not GA. This is not available yet. Yeah. So the question is, where would the mediation server be placed? We think the mediation server has to be somewhere on premise, because Ramesh's user pool is used for signaling. So the call is going to land on premise, and the call is going to go outbound from on premise. The question is, ExpressRoute going to use that? We do. We strongly recommend to have an ExpressRoute configured between on-premise and online. Because that's going to be a lot of the media path, especially for audio.
Is the media stream on media bypass going straight into the gateway? So do you have to open up that gateway to external, or is it going still via the on-premise edge?
Can you repeat the question? We didn't hear.
With the way that's drawn, the media stream, is it going straight into an external IP to do media bypass, or is it still actually going in via your on-premise edge?
If the user is connected remotely, as working from home, is going to go to the edge.
Okay. Question over here.
Yes.
Other way. Over here.
Yes.
So I know this is your initial thinking, but what components will be required? You mentioned the mediation server,
yep,
or on-prem. So what components can we get rid of versus keep?
It's a good question. We do think initially will require this will require Link 20. Skype for Business 2015 deployed on premise, because we'll have to do some work on routing. Once this is deployed, I think we can reduce some capacity on the pools and on the edges. But that's a very good question. Let me drill down more with you. Let's have a conversation, because, as I said, this is very, very early. I don't think we got to that level of detail.
Question over here.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Is there more of a commitment to make hybrid a first-class citizen? There's been a lot of scenarios in the past where they just haven't worked with hybrid. And the ACP experience, at least in North America, was all but impossible to get set up. One of the two vendors refused to do it, and the other one took like 3 months worth of NDAs and beta and no support from Microsoft. The other big one for me is there's no support in the clients for Office 365 MFA if you're using hybrid. The mobile clients just don't work at all. The desktop clients are not really a usable end-user experience. Is there any commitment to improve the level of supportability on those two issues specifically, but also just to make hybrid more of a first-class citizen?
Thanks for that feedback. I'd like to follow up with you to understand some of the comments about client support. We support Link Client 2013 and Link Client 2010, and I know mobile.
But not with Office 365 MFA. It doesn't work.
It's
changed since the end of 2014. I'm happy to talk to you.
Okay, I would be interested in having that conversation. It's new. Okay. All right. We have very little time left. I'm going to scan through this about Exchange and SharePoint dependencies in this hybrid mode. I'm going to reemphasize the key points. The primary topology that works well between Link and Exchange is when Exchange is online as well for a given mailbox. It gives you the highest fidelity across the Link and Exchange, Skype for Business and Exchange scenarios. The other combination where Link, Skype for Business is online and Exchange is on-premise has some limitations like presence in Outlook web app. IM in OWA will not work. Scheduling meetings in OWA, archiving via Exchange, voicemail, the UM will not work, and unified contact store scenarios are also impaired. For SharePoint, there aren't a whole lot of integrated scenarios. We call out here the presence in SharePoint. The presence is being done through a client API, so that will continue to work in both combinations. And for skill search, it's only available for on-prem to on-prem. Right. I put here in the slide a set of very interesting sessions that happened earlier in the week that cover a lot of the details on some of the things that we mentioned here, like the strategy for business voice online, large meetings, the broadcast meetings that we talked about. Please use this slide to reach out to the other presentations that are relevant for additional details for hybrid. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on, this is more of a general hybrid question that I'm in right now. I'm waiting for I believe I'm still waiting for my online tenant to be flipped to Skype for Business. When that happens, will attendees to that meeting start seeing the Skype web app instead of the Link web app? And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, if I'm still running Link 2013 server on-premise, once the new clients and these changes, will the Link web app still be the primary web app going forward for all those meetings, or will at some point you rebrand the web app to Skype?
So your first question, once your tenant gets flipped to Skype for business experiences, online meetings will flip to Skype for business. The web app. The web app is going to flip to, it's rolling out. So your tenant is going to get flipped shortly after your web app is going to become Skype for Business web app.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. So I'm just trying to figure out when my user will start seeing that Skype. Because now, since we have upgraded the client, all the meetings are going out as Skype meetings, but then they see Link web app, and so that's kind of causing some confusion. So I was kind of hoping that you guys would also rebrand the web app completely since you've rebranded the meeting.
I'm learning that the web app experience flipping to Skype is rolling as we speak. So it's happening. Depends on how fast the deployment runs.
I had a quick question around DNS. I understand that when you're in a hybrid mode, you're supposed to leave like auto-discover pointed to on-prem DNS and servers and services. Do we need to add any DNS records to support hybrid mode?
So DNS resolution, while in hybrid mode, should indeed point to on-prem. The SRV records to point to the on-premise edge, and I think the same is true for auto-discover.
So no. I lost it. Okay, no server records. Cheers.
Right. Right.
Is it still,
Yes.
is it still a requirement to have Office Web App for support on-prem users?
So I think, did we get the mic turned off? Yeah, okay. So